The Zimbabwean cabinet officially approved a landmark constitutional amendment bill that proposes extending the presidential term of office from 5 to 7 years. This move is part of the Constitution Amendment Number 3 bill, which seeks to reshape the country's political framework and potentially allow President Emmerson Mnangagwa to remain in power until 2030. Let's talk about this with Dr. Justice Mavedzenge from the University of Cape Town. Justice, appreciate your time. Thanks for speaking to us this afternoon. What was your immediate reaction when you came across this news?
Thank you, Hugo. Good afternoon to your viewers. I think the appropriate way of referring to what Cabinet approved on the 10th of February is a planned constitutional coup. It is not just a constitutional amendment. It is a constitutional coup because what President Emmerson Mnangagwa seeks to do is to extend his time in office without following the due process that is prescribed in the Constitution. And that is what a constitutional coup is about.
Now, there's been much talk that the only way that this can actually happen is via a referendum. But we're also picking up that there seems to be loopholes in the current Constitution that allows it not to go to a referendum, but for cabinet, as they've done, and for parliamentarians to vote.
No, the loopholes only exist in maybe President Mnangagwa's mind or in the minds of his associates. The Constitution is very clear in Section 328, subsection 7, that if anyone or if government wants to change the term of the length of the term of office, that change has to be approved by Zimbabweans through a referendum, number one. And even if Zimbabweans approve the change through a referendum, that change cannot benefit the incumbent. This is what the Constitution in Section 3287 says. But of course, what we are witnessing is a planned constitutional coup similar to what we saw in 2017, when those that are planning a coup want to do a coup. They create confusion. And what you are hearing, that the Constitution has loopholes and so forth, is just a way of trying to create confusion in order to justify a coup that they are planning in Zimbabwe.
So in this instance, if the Constitution is breached, if we can use that term, what happens? The various voters in Zimbabwe, the citizens of Zimbabwe, have obviously voted parliamentarians into parliament with the purpose of them looking after their interests. If it is perceived that their interests are not being protected and there's a breach, is there any form of restitution?
So maybe before I go to that question, before I answer that question, Hugo, the other element to appreciate is just to clarify that there are no loopholes in the Constitution, and just to clarify that there is no doubt in terms of what must happen if there is to be a change in a term of in the length of the term of the president or anyone else who is sitting in a constitutional office. The highest court of the land in Zimbabwe, the Constitutional Court, ruled in a case titled Mupungu versus Minister of Justice. It ruled unequivocally that a change in the term of office for the president must be subjected to a referendum before it can be effected. And even if it is approved in a referendum, it cannot be applied to the incumbent. So there is no doubt that President Mnangagwa is supposed to subject his proposals to a referendum. But you asked a question about, is there any respite? Is there any solution? What the international community and what South Africa in particular must understand is that the decision to push these constitutional changes is not being undertaken in a vacuum. It is part of a process which President Mnangagwa and his government have been working on for the past 10 years. They have introduced various kinds of laws to close democratic space You would recall that in 2025, they introduced the Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Act, which basically makes it impossible to run a civil society organization in Zimbabwe without the risk of being arrested and tortured. Then secondly, they've effectively banned protests in Zimbabwe. Those who dare to protest in the streets are arrested, detained, tortured, some are disappeared. This is the reality in Zimbabwe. But I think the international community, particularly SADC and the African Union, has an obligation to hold President Mnangagwa accountable. Why? Because African Union law, in particular, Article 23 of the African Charter on Elections, Democracy and Governance, says any undemocratic change of a term limit is a form of an unconstitutional change of government. And therefore, it is appropriate for President Mnangagwa and his government to be sanctioned under the African Charter on Elections, Governance and Democracy if they proceed with this proposed amendment without subjecting it to the people of Zimbabwe for their approval. But more importantly, the constitution that we have in Zimbabwe, Hugo, was adopted in 2013 after a lot of hard work by President Thabo Mbeki and later on President Jacob Zuma, facilitating the discussions between political actors in Zimbabwe. And at that time, it was everyone came to agree that part of the governance problem in Zimbabwe, which was causing a multi-layered economic crisis, was constitutional. There was need to adopt a constitution that solidifies the governance framework in Zimbabwe. And this is how we got to have this constitution in 2013. So this constitution is a legacy of President Thabo Mbeki and President Zuma's facilitation in Zimbabwe in order to help mediate and mitigate against the Zimbabwean crisis. And I don't think the government of South Africa should just watch and let President Mnangagwa continue with his planned coup, because certainly, I think there will be repercussions in terms of political stability in Zimbabwe, but also in terms of regional stability in SADC and African Union.
Justice, a couple of questions, and the first one is just how much resistance is coming out of Zimbabwe? Because this conversation around Vision 2030 started a few years ago, right? And there doesn't seem to be sufficient moves to stop it internally. What is the expectation if the people of Zimbabwe are not fighting it? For instance, what expectation do we have from SADC, from the African Union, from South Africa itself to resist this move when so many coups have occurred across the continent that they have not been able to stop?
To their credit, Zimbabweans are doing their best to fight this military regime and push back against its undemocratic tendencies. Just 3 weeks ago, Zimbabweans launched what is called Defend the Constitution platform, DCP, which is one of the many platforms that have been created to push back against this proposal of a constitutional coup. But what the response from President Mnangagwa's regime, has been that of brutality and cruelty. Just 2 days ago, the Defend Constitution platform colleagues announced that they would like to organize a peaceful march to protest against this amendment. And the reaction from government operators is that they will unleash violence, they will arrest and detain those who will organize this protest. So what we have to understand as the regional and international community is that Zimbabwe is run by a competitive authoritarian regime which pretends to be democratic, but in reality it is a vicious autocracy where those who dare speak out from within the country are tortured, they are arrested, and they are harassed in all sorts of forms.
Allow me to come in very quickly. So you speak of this authoritarian regime that is vicious. President Mnangagwa is in his second term of office, and there's been no pushback from SADC, from the African Union. This ball has gathered momentum, right? This move has gathered momentum. It's gone to the cabinet, has been passed. Is it likely to be stopped? Or can we, in the next few months, confirm that President Mnangagwa will be president until 2030?
Or even beyond. I do not think that if the Zimbabweans do not get solidarity from SADC and from the African Union, I don't think that President Mnangagwa will stop. I think he will continue. By the way, he's not only seeking to extend his office in his time in office without approval from Zimbabweans. He's also changing the constitution to give himself the powers to appoint judges without any checks and balances. And you can imagine what will happen. So basically what SADC and African Union should imagine when they see President Mnangagwa doing what he's doing is a return to the pre-2012 crisis, where we saw massive migration, we saw the economy tumbling and tanking, because all these things are connected. If you have a breakdown in the rule of law, you will naturally have an economic crisis.
All right. Now, proponents, though, say Zimbabwe needs policy continuity. What is the best constitutional argument and for a 7-year term? And what problems does it solve that the 5-year term supposedly can't?
Well, Hugo, I mean, Zimbabwe is not a special country that is different from others. Let's take, for example, South Africa. Imagine President Mbeki saying during his time that he wants now to continue as president of the country because he's doing a good job, or President Mandela.
I think Donald Trump has made that suggestion. Well,
so unless we are now accepting that President Mnangagwa is coming in the same fold as Donald Trump, then he cannot deny the fact that he is a dictator. And in any case, if at all he is doing a good job, then the right thing to do is to go and ask the people to confirm that he is doing a good job, and therefore he can continue as president of the country.
Well, Justice, I'm afraid
that he's avoiding going back to the people is a sign that he's doing a poor job.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Appreciate your contributions and thoughts on this matter. Dr. Justice Mavedzenge from the University of Cape Town speaking to us after Zimbabwean cabinet officially approved a landmark constitutional amendment bill that proposes extending the presidential term of office from 5 to 7 years.